Throughout history, people have made amazing accomplishments that define themselves. Now, it's our turn to tell those accomplishments, to tell his story, her story, their story, and even your story. With Mike Wexler.
Welcome to Your Story with me, Mike Wexler, and I have a very special episode for you guys. This individual I have talked to before on the Sock Monkey Mike show, but now I feel like that we have a great chance to have a more in-depth and professional conversation. This man has been a ring announcer, commentator, and not only that, but a video game extraordinaire. Ladies and gentlemen, the handsome voice, the dashing Adnan Kureishy. How are you,
I'm doing very well, Mike. How are you doing today, dude?
You know what? It's a great day in a very dark setting, but you know what? We're still doing good.
Listen, I like it when it's more gloomy in California. It's too hot these days, and now it's getting cool right now, and I'm going to take advantage of that as much as possible before the temperature goes up, and I just have nosebleeds, and it's terrible.
You know what's weird is that, like, 1 week it's like 90. And then the next week, we're literally at like 70 and like cold.
It's yo-yo weather. Yo-yo weather's the worst because that's like the way you get sick. So just always, it's so hard to keep yourself in a state of homeostasis when the weather goes up and down like this all the time.
I actually have not heard of homeostasis since like science in middle school. So.
It's a good word to have in your lexicon at all times. Homeostasis is just good to have, like, period, to just know, like, I'm in a perfect state of homeostasis in this moment, you know?
Yeah, so once again, this podcast is called Your Story, and I always like to highlight individuals' stories. You know, you have an amazing story with your beginnings and your acting career and all that. But one thing I do want to start off with is the Adnan Invitational. I know we kind of got into it last time, but before COVID, you actually held an event that was, you know, full of your favorite video games. You would have tournaments for your birthday. So can you talk to us about, like, how special was that for you to celebrate with not just friends, but also have a little competition involved?
It's, for me, I just always love fighting games. Fighting games were usually like my favorite like genre of video games in general. And so the Adnan Invitational came about just like, I forgot it started like, so I went from like 2004 to 2019. So even before COVID, I had already actually like kind of like, I think the 15-year run was a good run. And it was just like, I want to just do something to make my birthday like an event type thing. So I'd hold these, you know, gaming competitions. I remember it started with Guilty Gear X2 on the PS2, and so many games like you know, cycled in through the catalogs over the years, like Soul Caliburs and Mortal Kombats and Street Fighters. So many different games that I did every year, and it was always such a huge party that like my friends, you know, would always look forward to, and it helped me actually too, like learning how to put stuff together like that. I think that benefited me later in life because I did have a little bit of hand in putting together the tournament that we did for Santino Brothers Up All Night, the last one we did before the pandemic hit. So I used that experience in building a tournament to actually build a tournament. So that's cool how I was able to kind of parlay like my personal life like experiences into something that helped me later. But it was always so much fun, and it was a blast, and it's something I miss very much because of the fact that, you know, I just missed being around my friends also that time too. And you know, cake's always good.
Oh yeah.
Let's not forget, you know, so you don't have a good birthday until you have a solid birthday cake. And so always keep in mind that I got like this really sweet Mario Kart cake this year. It was delicious.
Oh, I mean, was it full of chocolate or?
No, it was an ice cream cake.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was a thing. Cold Stone was doing some promotion with Nintendo or something like that, and it was this really cool like Mario Kart themed cake, and it was delicious. So.
My favorite cake, I mean, I don't know about everybody else, but I mean, cheesecake is the home run for me.
Cheesecake's good. I always like getting like the marble cakes where it's like kind of like the chocolate and vanilla. Okay. And I always like white frosting for whatever reason. But you know, but honestly, you can't go wrong with a majority of cake. I also really like carrot cake.
Really?
Do you ever just go to the Albertsons and you just see the slice of carrot cake and you're like, I'm getting that because it's got a carrot drawn on it, and then you get it and you're like, this is fantastic. I love carrot cake. So.
I mean, carrot cake's a really interesting choice. That's the same thing with red velvet cake, I would think.
I think it's an underrated cake. I think carrot is a very underrated. If you haven't had carrot cake today, go out right now. Pause this, come back to this later, get yourself a carrot cake, sit down with that piece of carrot cake, and enjoy the rest of this interview afterwards.
Well, I appreciate it. And once again, please subscribe to the channel at Mike Wexler, which is now under. If you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you go subscribe over there. at Your Story with Mike. Speaking about your story, let's talk about your story of Adnan Kureishy. So I know that you had humble beginnings before you making your debut with the United Wrestling Network. Can you talk to us about like where did that kind of fuel for a dream like this start for you?
It started because like I was tired of just kind of like doing what I was doing before this, because I was just working like just regular jobs and just like living life like normally, but just not necessarily like super happy with what I was doing. It was just stuff I was doing just to get a paycheck or whatnot. And at one point, like I decided like I wanted to take an opportunity, just see what happens when I bet on myself doing things. So I remember, showing up at Santino Brothers for the one-day training, getting my ass beat and throwing up because it was rough. But it gave me a lot of good life experience, and it also kind of put the bug in my head that maybe I want to do something in this. And then getting the opportunity to then, stay there into their first non-wrestler course and parlay that into everything that I've parlayed myself into, I think it's always like a dream come true, but it's always a trip just to kind of like look back at how I started and the things that I did. And if I didn't take that chance, what I would be doing, would I be here with you right now? Probably not.
I mean, hey.
I'm assuming I wouldn't. You wouldn't have been wanting to have interviewed a guy who was at GameStop for way too long. Don't work at GameStop, kids. Never. In any case, I'm not shy about ever saying that ever. But in any case, if I didn't bet on myself and I didn't, put in the work that I had to put in and whatnot, I think I would probably be a lot less happy than I am with my life right now. Like honestly, like the things that happen when you put your best foot forward and you really believe that you can do what you do and you show the right people, what it's like to, give it your all. You want to show people that you're always willing to help, you're always willing to work, and parlaying that into everything that I have, it's honestly like I couldn't ask for more.
The famous saying, and I have to say it because I know I've said it in past interviews, process over outcome. That's how I always say it from Mike Bennett, who, of course, part of the NWA, and of course, in many other promotions.
He just re-signed with Ring of Honor, actually. Him and Maria just re-signed with Ring of Honor. So congrats, Mike and Maria.
Right? But I always go by that saying because, life is truly a process. And you always have to kind of remember it and kind of just acknowledge that process in the first place.
I mean, Kevin Condren used to say the same thing. He was managing Scorpio Sky for the longest time, at Wrestle Circus and other places. Just, trust the process. And that was, that's what I ended up doing with myself because he had a hand in my training too. I really did trust the process, like in real life. And, here's where it's led me to.
Right, and then of course you are doing stuff with not only Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, but also New Japan Strong.
Yes.
I think it's really interesting because you had guys like the United States champion and Jon Moxley come down there. You had Kenta come down there. You had basically all the main stars of the New Japan world go down to this local area in California just for the taping of New Japan Strong. And of course you have you as the ring announcer and also commentator as well, working both sides. So can you talk to us about, because I find it really interesting that you have this opportunity with New Japan Strong.
Like I've never done commentary there, unfortunately. That'd be cool. It's Kevin Kelly and Alex Kozlov that do commentary. I'm the English ring announcer for Strong, and it's really cool just being there. Because that was the goal for me for day one, was to make it to New Japan Pro Wrestling in one facet or another. So I'm there right now with New Japan Strong. So that was just that's always like a moment that I have to wake up and go, oh, right, I'm doing New Japan. That's so cool. And you talk about the guys who have come by, like a Jon Moxley, like a Kenta, like Yuji Nagata, the legendary Yuji Nagata we just had on New Japan Strong, and just other guys who have come through, Ring of Honor guys like Bateman and PJ Black, and just the development of the young lions like a Carl Fredericks, he wasn't a young lion. His graduation was essentially Lions Break Collision, but then you look at Clark Connors and the upcoming with the Alex Coglins, the DKC, Kevin Knight, all those guys are really going to be potential huge stars, I think, for New Japan Pro Wrestling in the future. And I think Katsuyori Shibata has done such a great job with the LA Dojo, teaching those guys how to be the best wrestlers they could possibly be. And just being a part of New Japan Pro Wrestling, sitting there, being in that environment, it's so cool to see the cerulean blue mat in front of you and and watch these incredible matches that happen, but know that I'm an important cog in it because I'm legitimately a timekeeper for it. I'm the one who delivers the results for the website as far as what happens as far as the timing, as well as whatever it was that finished the match and stuff. And it's such a cool experience though, just being a part of New Japan in any way, especially having worked up to that, because getting to New Japan Strong, it wasn't like I was just out of the blue, just picked to be on there. I was working for New Japan in smaller capacities, helping out, doing merchandise for them and helping out with other little side projects if I was ever given the opportunity, and being able to then work my way to being the English ring announcer for Strong and Collision and all that. It's absolutely been a dream come true, and I couldn't be happy with that either.
Well, you are definitely living the dream when it comes to New Japan Strong and also the United Wrestling Network. One thing that I did want to mention too is just the story that you have going into the United Wrestling Network. I mean, that you've had some experience with acting and all that, and then going into the United Wrestling Network. What would you say is like your proudest accomplishment during that process, heading into where you are today?
Like with the United Wrestling Network, I think it's just more so that I got there as quick as I did, because when I started at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, I was only like 5 months into my wrestling career at that point. I had debuted in November of 2017, and in actually 6 months. So 6 months in. And then in April of 2018 was the opportunity I was given a set of tapings to actually do. And I remember the main event of the second episode I did was Willie Mack and Bad Dude Tito for the Hollywood Heritage title. And it was just a trip that that I went from, starting off to doing television and then learning essentially my career started in a very serendipitous way to getting on television that quickly, because it's such a great learning environment.
Oh yeah.
And it's so weird to look back on my stuff from when I debuted and look back at how terrible I was and wonder why they didn't just get rid of me. Somehow they kept me around for 3 years and I'm still here. And I'm just like, cool. So, and it's led me to all these things, but it was invaluable, the fact that I was able to get on that platform as quick as I did. And then, working myself around the California indies, trying to get bookings wherever I could, and then being parts of promotions, obviously my home promotion of Santino Brothers and all the great stuff that we did and how much we were growing, and even being part of Wrestling Pro Wrestling, so much fun, and it gave me a lot of valuable experience, also connected me to a lot of important people, on top of just being ridiculous and fun, having to, be in a battle royal in a turkey suit. So any of that stuff's amazing. But as far as the United Wrestling Network in specific, it was absolutely invaluable also into also helping me, meet people who have now gone on to do bigger and better things even, because in working with promotions like an Impact, or which led to, my opportunities with New Japan Pro Wrestling, meeting the right people for that, and also, in general, it's hard to put into words how important and how valuable my particular experience went. And I definitely credit to where I started at Santino Brothers, to where I started with Championship Wrestling for Hollywood and the United Wrestling Network. So there's so many important things, so I can't really pin it on one. I just remember early on being the trippiest thing. When I started there, a month later I did an NWA World Title match, and I'm like, how did I'm not even a year in, and there's Nick Aldis and Crimson and Josephus, and it's Coastline Clash, and it's an NWA World Heavyweight Championship match. And I didn't grow up with the classic NWA. My NWA champions were the early days of TNA. So it was Jeff Jarrett and Christian Cage and Sting and Abyss and AJ Styles. That was my context for the NWA World Title. So that was really cool for me to be part of that history, and just also it's been cool also to be part of the development of the United Wrestling Network over the past few years, and seeing how much that's expanded and grown to where now it's not just Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. Championship Wrestling from Arizona was killing it. We have the other market versions that we had in Texas. We have the San Francisco version of the show. We have Championship Wrestling from Memphis, which spun off into its own thing, because it used to be on the CW30 presented by Pro Shingle, and now there's the possibility of Atlanta. So there's a lot of really cool things happening with the United Wrestling Network, and I'm just glad that I've been able to kind of put my footprint into it and kind of help leave my mark on everything that's gone on over there.
Oh yeah, and you are leaving your mark and you are making an impact wherever you go. I feel like also is that you're having a great time because you're surrounding yourself with people that are passionate or as passionate as yourself.
Yeah, it helps for sure. Like, you don't want to be around in a production and be like, everybody hates what we're doing. Why are we here? It's not fun for anybody. It's not good for anybody. I don't think it drives anybody either. So it helps that, like, you know, the people behind the scenes are so into what's going on when it comes to the wrestlers, when it comes to the referees, when it comes to, you know, your EPs and your production and stuff like that. Like Nick Bonanno, who just became our EP, you know, is 100% like full bore into everything that he's doing with it. We have Aaron Stevens doing our creative now, and he's always has all these amazing ideas, and he's put the show into a different creative direction. I think it's been really cool to see, and it's been a lot of fun to watch and see how our show has changed. And like, honestly, if you're not watching it, there's so many entertaining and really cool things that have happened and are going to keep happening that I think it's very exciting. So, and it's cool that Dave Marquez has been able to, you know, set up this place. You know, it originally started this as like NWA Hollywood and spun it off into his own thing, and now he's expanded it and done so much with it. It's important to realize how valuable it is that if you can get on board somehow, either, you know, or at least study what's going on over there. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and there's a lot of really great people that really put that together, and it shows when you watch the product, I think.
Oh yeah, and then you also, when you watch the product as well, I mean, I believe you celebrated your anniversary when it comes to the professional wrestling world recently. So seeing that from the beginning to now, like, do you reflect on that?
All the time. Because November 4 is my Wrestleversary, so that was my debut, and then I just celebrated my debut on television. So in total, I've been in the business a little over 3.5 years now, and then I've just crossed 3 years on television, and I reflect on it every single day. Every day I wake up and I do something involved in wrestling, I just look and see, like, cool, I'm doing this today. Remember when I used to not be anywhere near doing this? Remember when I was stuck at GameStop and how miserable that was? I'm not doing it.
Listening, please.
No. I was so angry when the stocks for GameStop went up. Like, why didn't you put the stocks into something cooler, man? Jesus. Anyway, but no, it's just, it's definitely, I have these full circle moments all the time. And I think about, like, one of the greatest examples is, like, going to see Rocky Romero as much as I did, like, as a fan before I was in wrestling, like going out to Vegas to see him at ROH, or when he was down in California doing shows, and, like, you know, getting those pictures with Rocky. And then, like, later on, like, now I work with Rocky at New Japan, you know, and that he's, you know, he's on the show, you know, pretty consistently, you know, he's the man. Like, it's so cool to, like, now I'm able to watch him wrestle like that close, and just, like, you know, when I was able to, you know, like, I was able to take that picture with him at New Japan, but now I'm in a suit because now I'm working with him as he's a talent and I'm the announcer, and it's just like, that was crazy. And then to look back on, like, when I first met Rocky in, like, Las Vegas, be like, that was this many years between this many years to when I was going to go pay to see him. And now I'm getting paid to work with him.
Right.
You know, those are the moments for me that always are the trippiest things.
Well, yeah, and you do speak about, you know, your classy style when it comes to ring announcing. You know, your ring announcing style is very unique. I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit of a Howard Finkel, a little bit. So can you talk to us about, like, where did you establish your style when it comes to Adnan Kureishy, the ring announcer?
I try, you know, other people try to borrow stuff from, like, you know, like boxing or MMA and stuff. There's a different style to how everybody sounds, for sure. It's just about finding your voice and trying to make yourself sound a little bit unique. You know, that's something Lillian Garcia taught me, and like, you know, I ended up, like, because of Pro Wrestling, she came down to one of those shows, and I made it a point to ask, like, you know, because she's a ring announcer, like, what is it that, you know, any advice I can get? And one is to find your own voice, you know, and so it's more, and it's interesting to get and hear how I've changed and developed, and it's also, my voice is different depending on what I'm doing.
Right.
So Championship Wrestling, United Wrestling Network, TV Adnan is different from New Japan Adnan, which is different from Independent Show Wrestling Adnan. There's a different style depending on the show that you do. So I've also made it, like, clear, this is how I'll sound for this is how I'll sound for this is how I sound for this, because it's presentating, and how you're going to be in front of people, not in front of people, what you need to get across to your audience. It's going to be a trip for me next week because I'll be in front of people for the first time in over a year.
Right.
And so I'm going to have so much energy that I haven't been able to get out to people. It's going to come through in that. But there's definitely a style to it. I'm more of like, I'm not the classic style. I'm more of a contemporary in the voice that I have. But I do it in the pro wrestling style, you know, as far as ring announcers. But I also, got tips from being on TV, learning to hold your microphones a certain way, or learning how to project. Projection I've never had a problem with when I was an actor. That was never a thing I had a problem with. So even if I didn't have a mic, everyone in the building could hear me. I'm almost positive about that. But in any case, it was finding your voice is probably the hardest thing for anyone. Is that you try to, even though we're all when you're all ring announcers, you're technically sort of doing the same thing. But you have to make yourself different. You have to establish. I don't sound like Justin Roberts. I don't sound like Greg Hamilton. I don't sound like Lillian Garcia. I don't sound like anybody. I don't sound like Abe-san in Japan, and I don't sound like my partner Takaro.
Right.
We all have a different voice. It's the idea that when I ring announce, that's Adnan Kureishy doing it and not someone else doing it. So.
Right, you're telling your own story, which is great when you're showcasing on a job that you love, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to hope that it comes through that I'm really enjoying what I'm doing.
Oh yeah, and then speaking about that, you've also worked with a lot of people within the United Wrestling Network. But before we get into that, shout out to Amber Bernard, by the way.
Oh yeah,
who's over there in terms of acting, and I do want to talk about your acting beginnings. Can you talk to us about because I know you were in a couple plays for, I think it was Peter Pan was one of them?
No, I never did Peter Pan. I did the one with Amber Bernard I did was Guys and Dolls.
Guys and Dolls.
That was yeah. That was and it's funny because you did the interview with me well, Amber Bernard? Yeah, we did Guys and Dolls together. So it's I did that. I've done class. I just did a thing. I just did sort of my first acting thing in forever where a friend of mine, the Magic Asian Man, Nathan Fan, he put together a somewhat of a production company-ish type thing that he's starting out called Spirited Shakespeare. So I just did an online production called Drunk Romeo and Juliet, which is almost exactly what it sounds like, where the audience contributes and it's like a drinking game, but you were doing Shakespeare, which made it funnier, So that was a lot of fun. But being an actor, I was always a ham just growing up, just as a personality. So acting was kind of a natural step for me. So I would do a lot of plays in high school and in college and community theater and whatnot. So it's funny also to think about that. Before I got into wrestling, I auditioned to be part of the Teatro Martini, which is this cabaret club in the Pirates Dinner Adventure in Buena Park, which is right next to the Medieval Times. So they have a cabaret there, and that would have been a full-time acting gig if I had actually made it through. But because I didn't make it through, that's kind of left me open to try wrestling stuff. So it's almost a blessing in disguise that I didn't get cast in this cabaret club. That now I ended up pursuing, my real dreams, and then ended up, here. But acting is important when, becomes to being a personality, a presenter, if you're on television or broadcast in some manner. Because I know I don't have a fear of the camera. I don't have a fear of this camera, or that camera, or this camera, or that camera, this camera, that camera. I don't have a fear of the camera. I don't have a fear of the stage. I've been in front of people. I've been in situations where you have to think on your feet. I did improv. It's all important skills to know if you're in front of the camera, because guess what? Things can happen, especially if you're live, because I've done live broadcasts and things happen.
Oh yeah.
And you have to think quick on your feet, and you have to recover from these things. And if you're on the stage and someone forgets their line, they can't go line in the middle of the whole audience and they just look weird, Then you have to figure out a way to be like, weren't you going to talk about the way the murder happened? So you got to help them along to their next line. You got to cover for these things. So it's just important for thinking on your feet, and I think it's just important life skills just to have. But it's something that makes it so I'm also. It's not hard for me to necessarily interact with people I haven't interacted with before, and especially with an audience, it helps me get comfortable because I'm warming up a crowd or something like that. You got to be able to sell yourself, to sell the show. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I feel like it's a true gift too when you're interacting with that other person, whether that's people in production or whether that's people of the crowd or the audience. You're trying to or you're having that connection with them. And that's something that I feel like is the best gift in the world, is just having that interconnection with that other person.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's always great being on a stage and having a moment, especially when people can feel the palpable emotions of that moment. Like I remember like doing this smaller show called Hard Boiled, and it's basically like me and this girl like at a bar. Like we like work buddies, but there's supposed to be a lot of sexual tension in the scene, and when it becomes palpable, like when like she grabs my tie and we're just like this close, but then nothing happens, the audience feels the emotion that's going through. It's happening in the scene, that you build this tension, and then later on that spins into I get into a fight with somebody, and then they feel the anger that comes out of that. It's just it was a really, that like when you are able to put the emotion in, when you can feel it on the stage and you're able to transfer it to your audience, it's really cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, especially when people come up to you afterwards and go, dude, you guys look like you were into each other. I'm like, well, yeah, we were supposed to feel like we're into each other. Otherwise, if we don't look like we're into each other, we haven't done our jobs. It's like, yeah, so, yeah, sure, whatever. No one's going to believe that. No one's going to believe sexual tension between people who are just so aloof like that. Nah. You have to, be in the moment. You have to be real in those moments, That goes with wrestling too. If wrestling doesn't feel real, then it becomes hokey, It has to feel like there's something at stake. It has to feel like what you're presenting, like either people are having a good time. Like you have to feel it in the moment. Like we all know that, there is a certain scripted nature to wrestling, but we present it in a way that's relatable, that people can feel things.
Right.
Whether it's to make them laugh, make them cry, anything of the sort. It's so cool to be able to do that, whether it's on the stage or in the ring,
Oh yeah, I mean, there's always those different aspects. One thing I did want to mention too is that the last time we spoke, Adnan had a clean-shaven, handsome face. Now he has upgraded to the legendary beard. So can you talk?
This has been on my face the whole time? You're kidding me. Well, yeah, I guess this just happened. It was just a thing where there was a break, there was a lull in a lot of things, where there was another break in production when things in the world were getting kind of worse again. So I decided, let's just see what happens if I just, look like a mountain man for a little bit. And so
it's not a mountain man per se. It's
no,
pretty lined up.
Yeah. I've taken care of it, but since there was this lull in production, I was all like, hey. As the powers that be, hey, is it cool if I just come back with some facial? And they're like, yeah, it's fine. I'm like, cool. So I just decided to do it and just run with it for the time being. Knowing me, I change up my look with that a lot. So it could be babyface Adnan again by the end of this interview. Who knows? So
maybe we might get that little preview.
Literally, before I was in wrestling, my facial hair situation was always all over the place because it was, I didn't have to look good for a camera. Going through regular life, it was always that. And I didn't work for Disney, which they require certain things on your face. It was I would grow out and I'd just get lazy and I'd just shave it and I'm like, cool. I'd get too lazy to shave, but then at some point I'm like, all right, this is too much, and I'd just get rid of it all. So it would always be inconsistent. Sometimes I'd have a full beard and sometimes I'd be shaving. So at the same time, that also saved me a lot on razors. So it's I just had these razors that were piling up. I'm like, cool, I don't need to order any more for a while because I haven't shaved in a little while. So it used to have an inconsistent look. Now I've decided, especially however many years in, might as well just experiment with how I look. And so far, it's gotten a lot of good compliments. And I think it's also nice to almost distinguish when I was working at this part or this part, depending on how I look too. You know what I mean? So that's why I think it looks the way it does.
Yeah, I mean, we can respect the drip, as they say, with the with the world famous beard. One thing I'm actually curious about too is, we talked about Adnan Kureishy. What is if in case anybody over here is not familiar with Adnan Kureishy, and you want to introduce yourself for the first time, how would you in a sentence, a couple sentences, how would you say, who is Adnan Kureishy?
I'm Adnan Kureishy, and I am the professional wrestling non-professional wrestler. That's what I am, essentially, because not only am I a ring announcer, I'm basically everything except a wrestler, although in reality, I've wrestled a handful of matches when you consider wrestling pro wrestling. It's just if you give me a giant turkey suit, then I'll wrestle. Otherwise, I'm not much of a wrestler. But otherwise, I would say, yeah, I'm Adnan Kureishy, professional wrestling's non-wrestler. essentially.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. And then finally, Adnan, well, first, before I get to that last question, I do want to thank you for taking your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And getting this going. But the last question I have is, so out of everything that you've done thus far, all the accomplishments, all the experiences, all the people that you met thus far, and then what you're doing currently, which if you don't know, he's going to be a part of Anti-Up, which is going to be in Las Vegas. So make sure you guys go check that out because you'll see him.
As May 15th, so depending on when this airs, if it's before May 15th, there's still time to get your tickets. And also, if you can't be there physically, it will be live on the GCW YouTube channel, so you can watch it for free. But if you can be there live, be there. And if you've already missed it, you can probably watch the replay on the GCW YouTube channel. So there you go there.
And then the final question is, are you proud of your story?
Oh, yes. Undeniable how I could not be proud of this story that I've done. You know, it's been so cool. It's been such a trip. It's been an incredible ride, and the ride isn't even close to being over. So I love the way this story is being told, and I hope to write many, many more chapters in the story that's being told at the moment.
Well, awesome. Well, Adnan, thank you so much for this round two. For those who don't know, you can follow Adnan on all social medias. I believe it's The Dashing Adnan.
Correct, at The Dashing Adnan on Twitter and Instagram, as well as you can now buy my t-shirts at whatamaneuver.net. That just launched. So whatamaneuver.net. Buy an Adnan Kureishy t-shirt, please. That'd be awesome. And then be sure to check out, of course, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, New Japan Strong, and then watch the replay of Anti-Up, and be sure to follow what we're doing at Santino Brothers as well, because classes have just come back in session. So if you're looking to get into professional wrestling and you live in the SoCal area, I couldn't recommend Santino Brothers enough. We should start accepting new students like within the coming months. So keep your eyes peeled there too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Adnan. Hopefully we get to talk again soon. And make sure you guys, once again, subscribe to the YouTube channel and the podcast, anything that you can find on audio platforms. And special shout out to the Orange Space, which, for those who don't know, the Orange Space is a great place to reserve space and do some work. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.